Hey everybody, welcome back. My name's Paulus. So today is a survival guide where I'm going to show you what to do when business gets tough. So business can be tough, as we know. Entrepreneurs are often called to make decisions and get through situations that would be unthinkable to the everyday employee. In fact, how we cope with tough times dictates the level of success we will ultimately be able to achieve. In this video, I want to share my thoughts on what business owners can do to survive and thrive in difficult times. Let's get started. So I know not everybody has been through a recession with their company. I had the opportunity to do it, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But we all went through a pandemic, right? And we, I think, realized that there's a deeper part of life. We're trying to connect our outer world with our inner world and trying to make this integration happen of something bigger, something deeper, something more powerful. But in difficult times, something I want you to remember is some of the greatest companies were built in recessions. And why is that? Let's go and dig into that. So let me kind of pre-frame this with a little bit of my backstory and journey kind of through the recession of 2008. So 2008 recession happened. I had two really large clients that kind of crumbled to nothing. They were in the finance industry and the construction industry. If any of you lived through that time, those were the two industries that got hit the hardest. And so I was left with a mortgage and not a lot of money to pay for my expenses. And so I shifted and I pivoted quickly because I had to provide. I was actually the sole breadwinner at the time, and you can say that anymore. But I needed to make money, so I started a tax practice. I'd done tax prep before. I don't love taxes, but I needed to put money on the table. Unfortunately, I did that for another 10 years before I decided to sell it. And I was like, I'm not being true to my purpose by having this tax company. But I learned a lot during that time. So, and then in 2010, I got a divorce, and then I really had to provide for everything. And we lost our home during the recession time, and I had to figure something out. So again, like I said, I started my tax practice. So I found a home where I could live in the back and I could do my taxes in the front, and that worked during tax season. And then when the money dried up during tax season, I struggled paying that rent. I started to have some of my old telephone answering service clients starting to come back to me. I ended up having to pivot to another office that was literally 600 square feet. There was a time when we had, I think, 15 people in the 600 square foot office. I moved into this office, and because I didn't have enough money, as I was trying to get the one business going, I had to always hire enough people to create the business model it needed to be, and I was bootstrapping the company. And so what happened was, I was in this 600 square foot office, and I didn't have enough to provide for an apartment or a house either. And so I ended up living in this office building. Got a storage unit, and I remember still opening up the storage unit in the mornings, and I would go into my plastic drawers where I had my clothes, and I would get ready for the day, and then I'd take the kids to school. And then when I had the kids, because it was 50-50 custody, I sometimes would I would go stay at somebody's house, but there were times when I actually slept with the kids in my office, and they would sleep under the reception desk. And so we go through really hard, tough times as entrepreneurs, and I think it refines us into something amazing. If I look back, when we go through the hard times, it's tough, right? But when we look back, I can't think of one hard moment that I've had in these last 15 years with my company that I wasn't grateful for that experience and what it taught me. And I've had experiences personally that have taught me to become a better business owner as well. I wasn't really blessed with a really great mother-in-law. I may have any stories like that. And she wasn't very kind, and she still isn't to this day. I don't have a relationship with her. I was really excited for a mother-in-law though, because after my divorce, my ex-husband's parents had both passed away, and I was so excited for in-laws and just excited for the experience. And God's funny. I think he has a good sense of humor, because he's like, oh, I'll show you. But I learned something. I learned about trust and boundaries, because when you have somebody kind of rip your soul out, you're like, I don't know if I want to trust anybody anymore. But the thing is that we still, no matter the hardships we have, this world is built upon trust. We need to be able to trust people. And it doesn't mean that we can't take away trust when they lose that, but it's still important. That's something I had to learn, is like, you still have to be willing to give people trust. And then you have to be willing to set boundaries too, right? So if they break the trust, you got to set boundaries to where you protect yourself and where you're going. So I learned a lot of that, which kind of helped me in the business world, and realizing that not everybody's got your back. The world is pretty wicked. I'm very big on having foundational values within my company, having a clear vision. And there's haters, right? There's going to be people that attack me, and that is okay. I told my husband the other day, isn't it great when you get to a point where it doesn't really affect you when you have haters. Like, you realize that means you're standing for something, you're doing something right. And then another hard experience I had was when I had a 4,000 square foot office space. Again, I hired a bunch of visionaries like me back in the day, and there was one employee that kind of soured in the entire team and kind of instilled fear in all of them. So I literally got to where I fired the entire company except for 2 people. And I remember I was pregnant at the time. I'm standing in this big office building and I said, God, this is a perfect time for me to shut down my business. And I don't know if you've ever gotten those impressions where it's like, nope, that's not your calling. Like, you're meant to do this. But I had such a clear vision in 2006. I thought it was gonna happen overnight because I could see it. 15 years later, like, it's so many pieces of my original vision are falling into place, and it's beautiful, it's magical, but I had to be refined. I realized that if my business grew fast in the early stages, I wouldn't have been ready. I would have squashed it. I would have made horrible decisions, and I would not have been successful. I had to go through that refiner's fire for 15 years to be able to do what I'm doing. I hire a lot of people. I have a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, and we also are taking care of, like, we serve a lot of entrepreneurs as well. Like, that is a lot of ownership and responsibility to hold. And so I'm grateful for those trials and those hard times. So realize as entrepreneurs, those trials are making us primed for greatness. So this next thing I'm going to say, you might not believe me, but I really don't stress very much anymore about business. I mean, I've come a long way because I'm a people pleaser. I like to make people happy. And so I would try to control the different things, and I didn't want customers the balls to drop and then not be happy. And that took a lot of work on my part to get to where if I know we're doing the best we can, like, I'm okay with things falling, because when things don't work out, it's a learning process. You learn from that. It's not like you failed, you learned, right? Actually, there was a quote that I think was done by Zach Penson. He's a hypnotist. He says, you either learn or you win, but you never fail. And if you have that mentality of you're either learning or winning, you can go forward with a little more faith and not stress so much. And the other thing to think about with business is if you look at business as problem solving, that's all it is. I think so many of us think like, oh no, I did this. It's like, I promise you, if you talk to every other business owner out there, they've experienced the same exact thing. Like, there's a million other people that are experiencing the same problem you are. The sooner we realize we probably really aren't as unique as we think we are, and that we can actually learn and talk to each other about the problems we're having and the experiences we're having. And that's really the mission to do, is really expose the things we're telling ourselves as entrepreneurs and be able to have the honest conversations, be able to say, you know what, I don't have it all together, and that is okay. Okay, so before we dig into what to do with all these, like, I gave you some of my experiences and my stories, and now we're potentially heading into another recession. We just went through another pandemic. They're already instilling fear of another pandemic. We went through a recession in 2008. Like, I don't think that any of this stuff is going away. I think we're just got to get used to being uncomfortable and what to do with it, right? So before we dig into that, if you want to see more of these videos, go ahead and like and subscribe. And again, if you're part of this movement, say in the comments, say, I don't have it all together. And that is okay. You know, it's okay that we don't have it all together, but we're going to learn from each other and we're going to get through these hard times. Okay, so what should we do now? We are heading into a recession. Like I said, there's great opportunities during recessions for companies, and that's important to remember. But how do you do it? Like, you hear of even Elon Musk retracting in his company. Like, you see it a lot, retraction. But how do you not retract, but actually go into the pain, right? How do you go into what's happening and look for opportunities to come out of it farther ahead? And I'll tell you some ways that you can actually do that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about how things were before. So there's a transition happening right now that we need to be aware of. Like I mentioned, the great unsettling. There's this, like, you think about the great resignation and all this tension between people, and you're getting two strong divides of different opinions. And there's an interesting phenomenon that's happening. But if you look at the corporate world, I talk about this a lot, where I'm pro-capitalism, but I think there's an underlying moral compass that we need to be a part of as companies. And if you look up corporatism, there's a lot of greed and bad things are happening in big corporations. If you look at management's only been around for about 100 years. And what's interesting about management when you research it is, like, we got really good at producing. We got really good at saying, here's the systems, here's the process, here's what people need to do when. And so it worked, right? Corporates could use people. That was their tools for efficiency at the time, right? I hate to say that in that way, but they use people to help make them efficient to get profit. And the problem is that people are changing. People want something deeper. People want to be a part of something bigger. Before, there was a divide between your business and your work life and your personal life. Now, COVID blended those together. There is no divide. Some of my best employees will have a kid sitting on their lap, and we're like, how does she get so much done with these young kids? Like, there's amazing things happening, but there's a blending happening, and people are unsettled because they don't know what the next thing is. And so what's happening is people are dividing into two sides. And I'm trying to bring commonalities together upon common values, regardless of political differences, social differences. Like, I want to bring people together upon some common values I talked about in leadership, like compassion, humility, and moderation in another video about those leadership qualities. I feel like in my business, I feel called to be an example for other businesses on how to create good culture, how to treat their employees, how to treat their customers, even their vendors. I have clients that mistreat us as their vendor all the time. I'm like, how do you that is a big part. Like we hold a lot of cards for what we're doing for you. Luckily we have ethics where we still do the right thing, but it's important to really understand this unsettling that's happening, this trend. So I wrote a book during COVID called Purposeful Focus in Business. I haven't done a lot to market it. I just felt called to write it. And now I'm actually starting to implement a lot of the principles with a lot of our clients. But in the book, I talk about this tension between employees and employers, and how as employers, it's our responsibility to understand what the values are that we have, what is the vision we have for the future, why is it that we do what we do. And purposes are going to be different. My purpose as the visionary is going to be different than the purpose of why employees come and work for me, and that's okay. But the purposes have to complement each other, right? Values, those aren't negotiable. Like people that we hire or clients that we hire have to align with our values. If they don't agree with our values, then they're not the right fit for us. And so it's a great tool to be able to hire and fire based on, right? And it's a great tool to be able to hold people accountable. Well, they're not meeting these values, so it's easy to have a conversation with them on why they're not a good fit for this company, and bless them, that they'll do better elsewhere, where maybe they align better with somebody else's values in a company. And that's okay. Like there's this trend to not have values in companies, and that you need to accept everything and all things. No, you need to know what you are, then, because people naturally want to congregate with those that they can relate with, right? And then your vision. The vision is non-negotiable too. The employees have to be able to get behind the vision of the visionary. And so I'm trying to create a movement where companies understand these foundational values and purposes, and then model the way for other companies to make that happen. So where am I going with this? So if you think about the Great Resignation, I didn't even know the Great Resignation was happening until an employee told me. I was like, well, that's probably a good sign that I didn't know that it was happening, because I don't have any employees mass exodusing, which I guess means we're also doing something right. But because of the Great Recession, and then the recession again will cause more layoffs, there is going to be so much amazing talent out there that you're going to be able to hire. When times are great, it's hard to find good people. Or we really struggled during COVID because a lot of people went out of the workforce. We never struggled hiring because we've been a virtual company now for 7-8 years. And since then we've hired really great talent. And then now it's starting to change again. I'm looking at this time of hiring some awesome people. There's amazing things that can happen when you get that talent. But obviously you don't want to hire if you don't have the growth to be able to support it. So how do you look for opportunities? Understand what's happening with people and the trend that is happening, and what people are hungry for and what they're longing for. That's where innovation and opportunities look at. Look at the mindset and the shifts that are happening, and then find out how to serve them, how to fill those needs. People are hungry for connection. People are also hungry, because we're such in a virtual world now, for tangible things. Think about puzzle building and gardening. There's all these physical things that have been brought back to life that we no longer did, right? Everything was video games and now Zoom and all this stuff. There's even a vintage trend happening where the nostalgia of vintage stuff is big. And so during this recession, just understand human behavior and patterns and find how to support that. Okay, so if you want a partner in crime during these unsettling times to help you have stress-free super growth, because like I said, I've really gotten to where I don't stress about business anymore. I just solve problems. It is what it is, and so many good things have happened from my trials that I've just learned to go with the flow. It's okay, what can I learn from this? So if you want a partner in crime and you can relate with me and my values and my philosophies, I'm doing a clinic where we talk about the different phases of business and what you need to be focused on for the different phases, so that you can feel a little confident in what you need to do when. So again, you can go to stressfreesupergrowth.com, and I'll see you there.